Hey everybody, it is Tom Sheehan of the Sheehan Real Estate Group of Compass here with your summer Greater Boston real estate market update. It's 4th of July is come and gone, and that is the official end of the real estate spring market as we transition to the different summer market. And in this video, I'm going to tell you what went on quarter two and why I expect this quarter to be one of the best opportunities for buyers we've seen in Greater Boston in a long time, and why if you're a seller, you really have to be honed in into the current market environment so that you're not surprised when you list your home for sale and it's just sitting there without any buyers. So let's get into those numbers. And as we always do, we get started with the median sale price of a single family home in Greater Boston, and that has increased by 6.4% since quarter two of 2024 to $1,091,000. Last year we hit over the $1 million mark, and it continues to rise, folks. I know people think that with some uncertainty in the real estate market and with high interest rates, they're staying stubbornly high, we would have some type of market correction, but that just is not the case, especially in the single family market. Now the condo market, a little bit different. We talked about it basically for the last 6 months here, how we've been seeing a softening of the condo market and curious if it was going to continue. And here, after the spring market has completed, we see a true disparity, strong disparity between the single family market and the condo market. This spring, a median sale price of a condo in Greater Boston was $752,000. Last year, it was $749,450. So again, very minimal difference. And just a reminder why we compare year over years, because our real estate market is very seasonal. You want to compare a spring market to a spring market and not necessarily from the last quarter. But even when we look at the last quarter, when usually we see a big jump from Q1 to Q2 in terms of value, it's just a slight difference from Q1. So again, just continued signs of a softening condo market in Greater Boston. Now let's talk about new listings. If you've been watching my videos for any period of time, you know I'm always talking about the lack of inventory. We saw some increase in the number of new listings of single family homes in Q1, and we were wondering if that continued, and it did continue. It was up 10% from last year. So not a ton more listings and not really the true relief we needed, but still better than a loss or a flat number. And for condos, we saw a much more significant increase. The number of new listings of condos in Greater Boston in Q2 is up almost 20%. And when you look at the single family chart, you can see how it's kind of trending down and maybe bouncing up a little bit. Here we see much more stability and a real big jump from this past year to compared to 2 years. And we're almost reaching those levels that we saw in COVID when we saw a lot of people listing their condos, especially city condos, when they just wanted more space and wanted to get out of the city and wanted to get to an area that was a little less densely populated. Now, when we look at active listings, this is where I start to get optimistic for buyers in this coming quarter. Active listings are homes that not just came on the market as new listings, but continue to sit on the market. So we can kind of see some accumulating inventory. And in Q2 of 2025 compared to Q2 of 2024, we saw 26% more active listings, more listings sitting on the market. And if you look at this chart, you can see we're up here, and for the last couple of years we've been hovering down here. So we're seeing an accumulation of inventory, which should allow for better conditions for buyers. Now for condos, we see even bigger increase. We see a 30% year over year increase, which is 40% from 2023. So it definitely seems from the condo market, we have seen probably a bottoming out of the number of this lack of inventory, this dire inventory circumstance that we've been experiencing. And now we're seeing a lot more listings of condos on the market. Condo buyers in Greater Boston have a lot more homes to choose from. And here's a little more indication of a softening market. The days on market, the amount of days it takes a home to sell is up 13%. Now that's not a dramatic increase, but 17 days on market compared to 15. So have that context. But as you can see, that's an increase. And we have been seeing dips in the days on market just because of that poor inventory numbers that we've been experiencing the last couple of years. Now, surprisingly for condos, it's flat. Don't really know how to explain that. We do see more inventory. What that just speaks to me is we haven't really seen the results of that active inventory staying there, because days on market doesn't end until you have an accepted offer. So if you have a lot of places that are just sitting on the market and don't have an accepted offer, those days on market are still accruing. So we might see the true outcome of those days on market, the accumulating inventory next quarter. And how about the number of sales? We are still in a really low sale market. There's just not a lot of activity. So while prices are going up and we're seeing a lot of accumulating inventory, from a historical standpoint, we are seeing a very small amount of transactions. So this is where you're seeing the effect of interest rates really showing up. We're not seeing in pricing, we're seeing in the number of closed sales. So we're just not seeing a lot of market activity that we would typically see in a normal spring market. So up ever so slightly, 0.2%, basically the same low number that we've experienced the last couple of years from a transaction standpoint. And with condos, we've actually seen a slight decrease in the number of sales. So single families kind of flat, condos down. So as far as number of transactions go, we're in really low transactions territory in 2025 so far. And here's the main culprit. We've talked about it, mortgage interest rates. This is going back 3 years, so still capturing a little bit of that time when interest rates were much lower than they are today before we had that big run up with the increase of interest rates. And as you can see, we're hovering right here, pretty just bouncing up and down. And I know in my past videos, for the, especially my year expectations video, I was anticipating interest rates to come down. And I still think we're going to get there. I don't know how dramatically down we're going to get, but they have been stubbornly high, and that has had a, like we just talked about, a big impact on the number of transactions that are happening. There's still people who want to buy a house, and there's still discerning buyers who are willing to pay more than the next person for that nice house. But these interest rates are keeping people from basically settling for any house. They're going to be discerning, and they're going to be picky when it comes to which house they're going to buy. So we still have interest rates in that 6.5 to 7 range, bumping up in and out of there. I think if we do get a dip like we saw in last fall, when we had these same accumulating inventory circumstances about a year ago, and I was predicting great opportunity, what happened in the fall, we saw this dip in interest rates, and all that accumulating active inventory got gobbled up real fast. So we have enough evidence that when we see sharp dips in interest rates, a lot of buyers come into the market and they're motivated to buy, and they're a lot less discerning. So what the last couple of years have told us is there's a lot of buyers on the sideline monitoring interest rates, and when those interest rates dip below a certain level, usually I think what appears to me is once it gets into low sixes, we have a lot of buyers on the sideline that are motivated to come in, and they start to gobble up whatever accruing inventory we've seen. Okay, so what does this all mean? Well, if you are a buyer, you need to be engaged. If you've been looking all spring, you haven't found your place, I know it's frustrating, I know you feel jaded, and maybe this isn't the time for you, but this is when the opportunity starts to emerge. We have accumulating inventory. A lot of buyers are going to leave the market, and you're going to find yourself with much less competition than you've been faced with for the last couple months. And to that end, don't be afraid to look at properties that are above your budget and been sitting on the market. While the normal spring market conditions have kind of trained you, like if something's at the top of your budget, it's probably going to go over your budget, so don't even bother looking at it. Now is the time of year where you can start re-examining homes that are at the top of your budget, or even some homes that have been sitting on the market over your budget, because those sellers are more than likely starting to feel the worry that they're not going to sell, and are going to get a lot more flexible on their pricing. Now, that being said, you don't want to be greedy. This is still a low inventory market, and the homes that are out there are probably what we're going to see here for the foreseeable future. We don't usually see a ton of listings come on the market in the summer. Some will eventually probably see a tick up in the fall, but the reality is if you can secure a property that fits your needs at a relatively good value to what you've seen over the last quarter, that's a win. Where I see some buyers make a mistake during these market conditions is they try to get too good of a deal. They don't get that accepted offer, or they enter some prolonged negotiations with a seller, and then another buyer comes in and swoops in and grabs that property. So be reasonable, but don't be greedy. Now, if you're a seller or potential seller, you have to understand the current market conditions. The spring market is when conditions are most favorable to the seller. And so you may have heard about someone else's story who just sold, maybe a neighbor, maybe a relative, and they're telling you about all the number of offers that they got, crazy over the asking with no contingencies, and how amazing that result was. And that probably did happen, but we are in a different market time. Summer market sees a lot of buyers leave the market. They get distracted. They're not as active. Maybe they're first-time home buyer that currently has a lease and they just renewed their lease. They've got vacation plans. They're away. This is a much slower time. So you have to adjust your expectations accordingly. There are still buyers out there, and they're probably motivated, but there's a reason why they're still in the market and haven't bought a property yet. They're probably more discerning, and they probably aren't willing to do what other buyers earlier in the market were willing to do in terms of offering something from a price that was hard to justify, or waiving all their contingencies. And also understand this time of year, more than any other, it becomes a beauty contest. So you have to be appealing in all different facets, not only price, but you got to look move-in ready. Most buyers want to be excited about a property, and the ones that buyers get the most excited about are the ones that look move-in ready. So make sure you take those extra steps to have your property look its best, and take the time to do some of those extra things and little slight upgrades to the property that is going to be something that's going to catch a buyer's eye. And lastly, you still want to have a plan. You don't want to rush into this. Like I said, it's a beauty contest. Making your house look as nice as possible. Take some preparation, take some time to do. So have a plan. Understand, okay, how much time is it going to take for me to get my house ready? What can I expect from a pricing standpoint? And what should I expect from a time on market based on that pricing strategy that I use? Because pricing is a strategy. It's not the price you necessarily expect to sell the home for. So that's it. That's your Q2 summer real estate market update for Greater Boston. As I end all these videos, everyone's situation is unique to them, requires a unique plan that fits their needs, fits their timeline. So please, if you're thinking about buying or selling or investing in real estate, reach out to me, shoot me a text, send me an email, and we'll create a plan that works for you and your timeline. Thanks for watching.